Hello everyone, Aimer back. Happy to say that I'm starting with the first installment of the reviews for the revival series of Mission Impossible. I have been looking forward to this after completing the big list. I still intend and will do some of the other things that I talked about, cleaning up the old reviews so that the video and audio syncs, doing some of the best of lists and all of those sorts of things. But I just have this hunkering deep inside to get going and get through the revival. So without further ado, let's go with Season 1, Episode 1, The Killer. This first episode is, of course, a remake of an original series Season 5 episode, which was the first episode of that series as well. And you can find that review right here. So this one starts out with a swanky party at a San Francisco apartment. There's some lively discussion going on. And then there's the arrival of our episode's villain, played excellently by John Delancey. He adeptly shoots some sort of capsule with a hallucinogenic drug at his target, who we learn is Tom Copperfield, a protege of Jim Phelps. The killer leaves quietly as Tom imagines himself to be on fire and jumps off the balcony to his death. The teaser, cold open, ends with a shot of Tom's funeral, with Jim standing out of sight but watching intensely. Jim walks away from the funeral with a purpose, and then we hear welcome music that we haven't heard in 15 years. Jim goes to a pier and finds a fisherman with whom he exchanges some spy speak, and the fisherman subtly offers condolences about Tom, leaving Jim to get his instructions from a special device in the tackle box. We're told, as in the previous series, Jim's mission is to take down the assassin, whose name is Matthew Drake, and determine the identity of his employer, Scorpio. Jim returns to his really nice-looking apartment where he has a fancy new remote-controlled computer and display, and learns about the operatives that he chooses to make his new team, replacing the old-style apartment scenes where he would look over dossiers and select them. What a wonderful way to modernize the two most iconic aspects of the series, by the way. As Jim says perfectly to describe it, time does march on. This ain't the old series anymore. We meet Nicholas Black, the disguise master, Casey Randall, the action girl, Max Hart, the war veteran muscle, and Grant Collier, the electronics specialist, who we learn is, of course, Barney Collier's son. There's your team, and Jim takes another determined look at their quarry on his screen. The team then gets together and discusses the difficult mission. They know that Drake is flying in to London to get at his target, but they don't know who he is going to kill, how he's going to do it, when, where, which is why he's evaded capture so far. He does things at random. They found a building to make a hotel where they'll bring Drake to. His plane is late, but Max and Nick are ready to get him into a cab and take him to the hotel once he chooses a random name out of the phone book. Remember phone books? By seeing the letter R and choosing the Rayburn Hotel. The team jumps into action to set up the hotel accordingly, needing 25 minutes to make all of the arrangements. Drake gets into Nick's cab, expecting to be there in 15 minutes because that's what it says in the phone book. Even though there are some issues about that, and I'll talk about those later. Officer Max pulls Nick over for speeding in order to buy the team some time, saying he's going 20 miles over the speed limit. Problem there. Max then arranges for the cab to get stuck between two stalled trucks, which Nick has to maneuver around rather than losing Drake. They finally arrive at the hotel. Drake picks his own room number at random, just like in the original script, and then gets taken up to his room. Jim continues to fume weirdly at the sight and thought of Drake around him. Instead of using his room's phone or the hotel payphone, Drake goes outside to one of the red payphones on the street to make his call, forcing Max to use a microphone to pick up the audio. Listening into the call, they get the information for where Drake is to meet his contact. They call back and tell the woman to meet Drake at the hotel, Nick impersonating Drake's voice, of course, in room 8 instead. Drake has selected room 7, so that they can intercept the info, and Casey can then take the contact's place with the real Drake. At a funny moment, Drake passes by the woman that he called on the hotel stairs, with neither of them having any idea who the other is. The team finds that the target is an African-American union boss, so Grant steps in to fit that role. Drake gets his instructions from Casey, and Max tails him, but loses him at the target's hotel. Drake manages to sneak into the hotel and get into the room underneath where Grant is and starts setting up his plan by making sure his target will be in the room in 15 minutes, then setting up a timed explosive in the roof before heading off. Grant is barely able to escape before it goes off. Drake returns to his hotel room to find Casey waiting for him there with a gun, telling him that he's out of favor with Scorpio, and her job is to finish him off and then take his place as Scorpio's assassin. Casey lets herself be overpowered by Drake, and he shoots her, determined to take out his boss, Scorpio. Drake ends up heading back to San Francisco to find Alfred Chambers, at whose party Tom Copperfield was killed, firing another hallucinogenic shot into Chambers' neck. Chambers takes an unseen similar dive off the balcony, but not before throwing a letter opener at Drake, who's wounded, but not fatally. The team and Drake look at each other while he's being taken away in a police ambulance, and in the end, Jim decides to stay on as the team's leader. Mission accomplished, and the adventure continues. I'm going to give this episode a grade of A. Please note, an A here does not necessarily correspond into the scale of A for the original, okay? We're starting kind of fresh, and I'm giving this one an A for the revival series. You can say that I'm grading on a curve or however you prefer to think about it. Let's start with some generic thoughts before I kind of get into the good and bad. The opening scene with Jim walking away from the funeral, just with that determined look on his face, that scene is just absolutely just boss. It's so emotional for me to watch that, and just sets the tone for the episode and for the entire series. It kind of degenerates a little bit as things go on, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. I definitely love this remixed, modernized opening. I have used the bass line from the revival theme as my phone's ringtone often. I did actually mention that in my introduction and my comparison of the revival series. If you haven't seen that, I'll post a link to that over here. I also like the new type of spy speak that Jim uses to get his mission briefing, and it now comes in with mini laser discs in a fingerprint-protected player with video rather than the old-school audio tapes where you just have pictures of various things. And kind of a throwback, callback to the original series, Jim speaks to a fisherman who has the instructions or the device in his tackle box. The same way, it was different spy speak, but still the principle of it was the same. Got a fisherman, tackle box. Love that kind of continuity and callback. It's still Bob Johnson, the same voice actor with the perfectly comfortable voice, and ending with the "as always, should you or any of your Iron Force be caught or killed." Again, it just really, really sets the tone of things going forward. I mentioned how in the revival, dialogue often takes the place of action. Instead of just kind of letting things unfold and we have to watch to kind of get a feel for what's happening, things are explained using expository dialogue. Sometimes it's grating, sometimes it's just silly. There's some of that in this, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. In the original episode, there was less talking. You kind of had to watch and follow the action to see what was going on, which did mean that there was a little bit more waiting as the plot kind of moved forward. But, so there's a balancing act there. Here, it's fine. It's not too bad. I don't know why, but I love the sequence where Jim picks the team. Probably because just visually it's great. Again, it's setting the tone. It's just the anticipation of getting back to the revival series, maybe for me. But I just found that to be freaking awesome. Loved watching that. Just great. Also, I did mention the moment where Matthew Drake, passes the woman on the stairs, the one who originally gave him was going to give him his instructions. That was a really, really cool moment. Kind of reminds me of the moment in The Mind of Stefan Miklos from the original series, where it's actually a hallway moment where important people are passing each other in the hallway and only Jim Phelps knows what's going on. Also, interestingly, they use some other details. They use room 526 in the hotel where the actual killing is supposed to take place. And they also reuse the alias Lou Lawrence when the assassin calls his target to make sure he's in the hotel room. So lots of little callbacks to the original, which is really neat. One other thing I wanted to point out, it's very, very cool, I think, how we are at this period in time. This episode was filmed and aired in 1988, at which point we did have a lot of technological advancement, obviously, compared to 1973, when the original series ended. But we're not quite at the stage of the internet. The internet sort of existed in its infancy, but 99.9% of people had not heard the word internet, not in 1988. I first heard it in 1992. Your mileage may vary. There were no cell phones. We were still using payphones and hard lines and those sorts of things. Mobile phones did exist, but they were not ubiquitous, certainly like they are now. Not that it matters for this particular episode, but, in terms of the way the world was, the Soviet Union still existed. The Berlin Wall still existed. The geopolitics were such that they were not so different from the way things were in the 1970s. This series actually took place at that perfect time where the team really couldn't be omnipotent. Right? If we were to try to make this kind of series today, I think it would probably be a bit difficult to create a compelling story because knowledge is everywhere. With the internet, the ability to communicate is everywhere. Everybody's got a cell phone. But this predates that a little bit. And I think that that's really great because you can make stories where there are certain limitations on technology, even though the technology is much better and visually things are much better. TV effects could go a long way at making things look cool. This is an example here, which I think is realistic. Grant is able to tap into Heathrow's air traffic control to see where Drake's plane is. That actually does make sense for 1988, I think. Given, the ability, obviously, the IMF works for the United States government, so they would probably have access to that kind of thing. So, again, just wanted to point that out. Really, really great point in time that this series took place. Moving on to things that were good. John Delancey as Matthew Drake is really, really good. I think that in some ways he's actually better than Robert Conrad in the original episode. He's different. He's a lot more cerebral, whereas Robert Conrad was more physically imposing, I think. But Delancey, I think, as Matthew Drake, is more kind of like a thinking man and more dangerous and menacing in his own way. But he is fantastic. I have always loved John Delancey as an actor. There's great teamwork in this one, just as there was in the original. Teamwork is generally not a problem in the revival. Sometimes it's a little bit unbalanced, but everybody generally does have something to do. So I don't think I have to point that out quite as much. The big thing here is that there is a better ending, and that is really the big difference between this episode and the last and the original. I pointed out in the list, and I did point it out in the full review for the original episode, that they didn't land the ending in the original. In that one, Eddie Lorca, played by Robert Conrad, goes to Scorpio's house, and Scorpio is just this random guy. He's Alfred E. Chambers, but, whatever. So what does that mean? Here, the fact that it is Alfred Chambers, somebody that we saw from the very beginning of the episode, it makes sense for him to be involved. And it just brings everything together in the ending. Other good things. I like the fact that Nick and also Casey have to practice imitating voices instead of just kind of magically being able to catch somebody's voice, as happens so often in the original series. They use different devices to kind of look at voice patterns and those sorts of things. That's really, really great. I like that it's not automatic. It adds that kind of dose of realism to it. Very, very nice. Another thing that is a callback to the original series, which I should have mentioned before, Matthew Drake reusing the line from the original episode, "You're not the girl I talked to on the phone." That was a really nice touch. Eddie Lorca said the same thing in the original episode. That was to Dana, Leslie Warren. And the circumstances were a little bit different, but it works just as well here as it did there. Really nice callback. Moving on to some things that are a little bit weird. I definitely do feel that this episode deserves a grade of A. It's an excellent start. There are some inconsistencies and a little bit of silliness that do kind of bring it down. One thing I didn't like was, as I've already mentioned a little bit about the strained dialogue. Jim, in the beginning, he's at the funeral, and he has this determined look on his face. And I mentioned that I really, really love that. He's kind of walking away. But when Jim kind of gets a little bit emotional during the actual, mission itself, he's just, I don't know how else to say it other than emotional. He's mentioning Scorpio over and over again, especially at the end when, Casey and Drake have their, shootout. Then Jim feels compelled to tell us, oh, now next stop, Scorpio. Okay, yeah, we know that, Jim. You really didn't have to say it. Also, when he's, at the front desk and Matthew Drake is checking in, and Jim's just got this look on his face, and he even tells Nicholas, oh my God, I want to strangle the guy. It just seems a little bit out of place for Jim Phelps. That's a feeling that I get. Certainly Jim Phelps in the original series would have never, ever, acted that way. That's definitely what I feel. The team kind of has to reel him back to reality and say, okay, come on, Jim, let's focus, sort of thing, which is just really bizarre to me. It really shouldn't be that way. Another problem I had were inconsistencies in the scenes where Drake goes to the hotel. Obviously, there was no Google Maps back then, so, an American audience may not have known this, but certainly for anybody who's watching from the United Kingdom, you're probably looking at what's going on at some of the stuff that happens in this episode and saying, what the heck are they doing? This is ridiculous. First of all, from the phone book, Drake picks out the Rayburn Hotel, which says that it's in Kensington and it's 15 minutes away from Heathrow Airport. Well, Google Maps will tell you that even today, using highways, which Nicholas apparently doesn't when he's driving, it takes at least a good 30 minutes to get from Heathrow to the Kensington area of London. And I'm sure it probably took longer 30 years ago. Okay? So that's one problem. The next problem is when Max stops Nick as, the police officer to kind of delay things a little bit, says, sir, you were going 20 miles over the limit. I'm like, this is the United Kingdom. They don't have miles. They have kilometers. What are you people doing? I just couldn't believe it. The map that Grant is using to kind of track the cab's process. It shows the cab going towards London Bridge, which is on the opposite side of London from the airport compared to Kensington or anywhere else in central London. So, I guess Nicholas is kind of taking the long route. I don't buy it. There's a whole lot of, there are a whole lot of problems. At least, unlike another episode that took place in the United Kingdom from the original series, at least Nicholas is on the correct side of the road for the United Kingdom. So props for that, I guess. Last thing I'll mention, not really weird, not really good, not really bad. But at the end of this episode, the team decides to, quote unquote, burn Matthew Drake. They're all standing there, with the obvious, hey, we got you sort of thing. And I've always kind of been of two minds about that. I generally don't like the IMF burning, their targets. I think it wasn't really necessary in this one. It wasn't terrible. I guess it's just one of those things, again, we're just trying to set a tone. It's the first episode of the series. Just thought I'd point that out. And I think that's all I have to say about this one. I'll stick by my grade of an A, and I dare say that we are off to a great start when it comes to reviewing the revival. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Really, really looking forward to getting through these episodes and enjoying them and picking a few of them apart as we go. Please like this review video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so that you get notified when new reviews come out. And please leave your comments about this episode and any other episodes that you'd like to talk about. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you next time.